Healthy female workers between the ages of 20 and 40 wanted for a military posting read an advertisement in the employment section of the German newspaper Hannoversche Kurier, published in 1944. The newspaper promised good wages, food, lodging and free clothing to those applicants. What was not clear is that the clothes were those of the SS, the accommodation was the Ravensbruck women's concentration camp, and the job consisted of carrying out the mass extermination devised by Nazism. A review of the main figures of the Third Reich can lead us to the erroneous assumption that it was an entirely male task. The truth is that the female role was essential for the functioning of the genocidal machinery. In this new military history video, we are going to meet the women who supervised those Dantesque installations, and in particular Irma Greece, the angel of death of Bulgen. The Ravensbruck extermination camp was located 80 kilometers north of Berlin, and was the largest female detention center in Nazi Germany. Between 1939 and 1945, more than 140,000 women from all over Europe were imprisoned there. These were generally resistance fighters or political opponents, but there were also many others whose only crime was being Jewish, lesbian, sex worker or homeless. Starting in 1941, Ravensbrück became an extermination center where between 30,000 and 90,000 women were killed. Some of them were executed in cold blood, others were victims of torture, malnutrition and brutal working conditions. To speed up the process, in early 1945, the Nazis built a temporary gas chamber in a hut next to the crematorium. It is believed that, in a span of 4 months, 6,000 prisoners were gassed. The facilities were supervised by female staff who received similar training to their male colleagues. In general, the workers were voluntary recruits from poor families. For them, working in a concentration camp was not only a source of money and lodging, but also of status. Wearing the SS uniform implied collaborating directly with the lethal machinery of the Third Reich, and allowed them to exercise tyrannical authority over the prisoners. In all, some 3,500 women worked as guards in Nazi concentration camps, all of whom began their training at Ravensbrück. Later, many ended up working in more well-known or infamous sites, such as Auschwitz-Birkenau or Bergen Belsen. One of the most important names within that system was Maria Mandel, general supervisor and in charge of training new entrants. She was directly responsible for the deaths of 500,000 women. She used to humiliate the prisoners with all kinds of methods, while forcing them to sing loudly. Later, already in Auschwitz, she created the Women's Orchestra, which was destined to play during transports and executions. Mandel instilled this violence in all the young Nazis who came to the facilities, including Irma Greece, the angel of death of Bergen Belsen, who we'll talk about shortly. One of the first women in charge of Ravensbrück was Johanna Langfeld. She was characterized by imposing all kinds of cruel punishments, such as keeping prisoners standing for hours in the rain and cold. She also used to beat them up for the slightest mistake during forced labor. However, Langfeld was against using the inmates as test subjects for experiments, so she was replaced for being too soft in the eyes of the Third Reich. Then came the time of the young Dorothea Binz, who at just 19 years old became a supervisor of torture and forced labor in Ravensbrück. She was particularly harsh on the Red Army prisoners, whom she called Russian pigs. Like several of her companions, she sexually abused the prisoners, before whipping or shooting them. On one occasion, Binz observed how a female prisoner ran to throw herself against the electrified fence with the intention of committing suicide. She stopped her and took her to a punishment cell, where she stripped her naked and beat her with a cane until the prisoner passed out. Binz managed to escape from the extermination camp in 1945, but was imprisoned in Hamburg that same year. She was tried and hanged in Germany on May 2, 1947, for dozens of crimes against humanity. But despite the violence of Binz and Langfeld, none was more infamous than Irma Greece. Greece was born on October 7, 1923, into a humble family of farmers. While still a teenager, she dropped out of school to join the German Girls' Youth League. Immediately the patriotic propaganda took effect, transforming the young woman into a fanatic of the Third Reich. The curious thing is that her father, Alfred Greece, strongly disagreed with the Nazi Party. When Irma came home dressed in her SS uniform, Alfred kicked her out, and that was the last time they communicated. In 1941, just 18 years old, Greece began her service in Ravensbruck, under the orders of Maria Mandel. Thanks to her unparalleled sadism, she quickly rose up the ladder of authority and was transferred to centers of greater importance. By 1943, she reached the position of female supervisor at Auschwitz, that is, she was the second highest-ranking woman after Mandel. Greece's violent practices made her famous, and she soon became instrumental in the operation of another extermination camp, Bergen Belsen, where she earned the nickname Belsen's Bitch. Her survivors accused her of murder and torture, for which she always used boots and whips, among other elements. She was also known for letting her dogs pounce on female prisoners, biting and even devouring them. If it wasn't the fangs from her dogs, it was the bullets from a firing squad. Greece randomly chose prisoners who were killed in cold blood without further explanation. As a last sordid detail, Greece used to sexually abuse the prisoners of Auschwitz and Bergen, whom she then beat brutally. What is intriguing is that the vast majority of Nazi female guards committed similar crimes. When the British Army liberated the Bergen Belsen extermination camp, the young Greece was one of the main detainees. She never denied her crimes, and even sang Third Reich hymns during her time in prison. At the Bergen Belsen trials, she was sentenced to hang at the age of 22, making her the youngest woman executed in England during the 20th century. Greece's life ended on December 13, 1945, she was then cremated and her ashes were scattered down a river drain. As you can see, female collaboration played a very significant role in the Third Reich. What is most surprising and terrifying is that, before the war, these women were mostly ordinary people, with no hint of the sadism of which they were capable. René Lacroix, a French prisoner locked up in Ravensbruck, recounted how the sentinels beat the weaker girls to death. The stronger ones were thrown to the ground to be kicked, humiliated, and subdued. News Catala, a Spanish survivor of the women's camp, also left her testimony about the Nazi guards. They were like skulls that looked at us, you only saw light, eyes and skulls. They were the dead who watched us. There are no words for so much moral suffering, for so much abandonment. Despite their inhuman behavior, only 77 guards were brought to justice, and only a fraction of those accused were convicted. The history of the women of the Third Reich is not as well known, but it was undoubtedly essential for Nazi Germany to be able to carry out some of the most disgusting crimes in history. Thank you for staying until the end. If you like this content, we invite you to subscribe and activate notifications. We'll meet again in the next military history video.